So personality can have a strong influence on the success of a startup, a new project, or new business strategy. And as it turns out, recent studies indicate that some personality issues are often found in successful leaders and high achievers, and in percentages higher than those found in a general population. So are the lunatics running the asylums? Our next speaker will explore this question. Jon Cabiria has over 23 years' experience working with emerging technologies as a technology psychologist, an educator, and an executive coach. His groundbreaking research into the therapeutic benefits of virtual communities was the first of its kind at the time it was conducted. As of 2010, he has been exploring the utility of augmented reality for an educational and therapeutic purpose, as well as the liquidity of modern life in a digital age. Please join me in welcoming Jon to the stage.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So they say when you give a presentation, you should know your audience first. So the first thing I need to know is how many lunatics are out here. I would like to see a show of hands. Lunatics? Okay. So what this tells me is that since we know that lunatics don't know that they're lunatics, if you raised your hand, you're actually okay. And those that didn't, you're the ones we need to worry about. In the book Alice in Wonderland, the Mad Hatter says, "Has everyone gone mad?" And Alice says, "I'm afraid so, but all the best people are." And that's one of my favorite sayings. How does this relate to what's going on here? So hold on to those thoughts for a second. I did an informal research study just a few years ago about new technology startup failures. And what I came up with was that 1 in 3,000 new tech startups survived after a 5-year period. And anyone in venture capital here might be able to back that up or even say, oh, it's higher than that. But whether I'm exactly on target, a little above or a little below, that's still pretty appalling. If we look into it further, we want to look at, well, why are they failing? Just recently, there's a new website called autopsy.io, which is attempting to aggregate the failed startups and find out why, to see if we can analyze the worst practices to help you avoid this. So I was reading over the initial reasons why these people said that they failed. And they would be what you would expect. The market wasn't ready for you. The financing ran out, or they couldn't get the funding. Things just didn't work out the way you thought. What they never, ever say is, we couldn't get along. We couldn't come to agreement. We couldn't make the right decisions. They never say that. And yet, in my 20-plus years of consulting, and anyone here that does consulting knows that a high percentage of the problems that you have to deal with are relationship issues. How do teams get along or not get along? How does leadership relate to staff? How does one department relate to another? How do you get things done? How do you get things done productively and efficiently? And that's where we come into my area, into psychology, human behavior. And as a media psychologist, what I look at is the interaction and intersection of human behavior and these technologies, not only in the workforce, but the technologies that we are creating and sending out into the world. So what I would like to talk about today is, are the lunatics running the asylum? And is that a good or a bad thing? So when you go to your office, you're going to come across a lot of different personality types, and you may even be some of these personality types in your office, whether you know it or not. So how do all these very diverse personalities, especially in a high-pressure, fast-paced, future-focused environment where this is going to bring out the best and worst in people. And if you're working closely with people over a period of time in a stressful environment, your crazy is going to come out one way or the other. And how will you each deal with that? So, here are some of the primary crazies that you're going to find in the workplace. Asperger's, and we'll go over this briefly. I'm not going to linger on the pathologies. Narcissism, obsessive compulsive disorders, it's your list there. What I want to do today is not treat these as pathologies, as illnesses that need to be fixed. Part of the reason is because recent studies show that a higher percentage of people with these various personality types exist in environments like this, and that the more successful the organization is, the greater likelihood that you're going to have a higher percentage of what my profession calls disorders, and what I think can often be beneficial. So here are just some examples of people believed to have, for example, Asperger's. Einstein, Graham Bell, Edison, Newton, good company. What is it about them that helped them along, other than perhaps just very high intelligence? Is the ability to focus, this attention to detail. In the environments that you're working in, there's quite a bit that requires this kind of intense focus. And this is not something that you can naturally develop. You're kind of born with that drive. We all know people that are very driven and very focused, and others that are kind of laid back. And parents, mothers and fathers, they can almost identify some of these traits within a few days after a child is born. So Asperger's, which is along the autism scale, adherence to rules and routines, a great propensity to pick out visual details or to engage in rather complex cognitive details. And they have exquisite focus. These pieces of art were done by people with Asperger's, and same with these line drawings. They have a compelling need to finish a task, and that they are adamant about completing whatever project is given to them. You're likely to have people like this in your workplace and not even know that perhaps they are somewhere along the autism spectrum. Narcissism, and we all know about this. We see a high degree of this in leadership, for example. Yet there's a strong benefit to having a narcissistic leader, because this person does not want to fail because it is a negative reflection on their sense of self. And since they hold their sense of self in at such a high level, they're going to do everything they can to propel the project forward, the organization forward, the new product forward. They can be very hard to work with at times. They can also be extremely charming. And that also helps open doors to get where you want to go. The obsessive compulsive person, all right? Again, when these details need to be dressed, when things need to be lined up, when they need to be perfect. Now, this is a person, if they're a colleague of yours, they can drive you crazy if you're not obsessive compulsive. But rather than look at that as a problem, as something that they should learn not to do, think about where this can fit in the organization and how this can help move things along and help all of you get to where you need to go. This is a hard one to get past, the sociopath and the psychopath in the workplace. And I'm not talking about someone that's going to kill you in the middle of the night if you do something wrong. But basically someone that has low empathy, And sometimes in business and in the organization, you have to make some really tough decisions, and you can't base it on emotion. If there's somebody in the organization that you like, but they got to go, you got to fire them. They're not working out for whatever reason, but you really like them, or they have certain issues where somebody with high empathy would have a hard time letting them go or giving them bad news. Sociopathy, psychopathy in leadership can be helpful so long as it's not a deranged pathology, right? We're not talking about the total crazies, but with that lower empathy in order to get some of these things done. You don't want an organization that is full of sociopaths. Well, and we do have them. I guess you can go to Wall Street and find them all over the place. Addictive personalities. And I know from my years of experience, and I know from myself, that when I get involved in something, it's 24/7, and it is in my dreams. It's the last thing I'm thinking about before I go to sleep, if it lets me go to sleep, and it's the first thing that pops into my head when I wake up. Now, as a business person, I think this might be a kind of person I might want on my team. And in fact, I hired a team, this is maybe 20 years ago, of these kind of what we call workaholics, but really work addictive personalities. And we pulled things together so fast. We beat all of the timelines. We came in way under budget because everyone was on board and they were living and breathing this stuff. So there is a place for this, but you also have to watch out because there's also burnout. Attention deficit hyperactive. All right. I mean, this is a big thing in the news, and we're seeing a lot more kids being diagnosed with this. I don't know if the diagnosis is accurate or not, but it's there. But there are benefits. When you're not looking so much for the focus, but you're looking for the creativity, when you're looking for people that are going to be thinking outside the box, when they're not just so focused on what you're saying that that's all they hear. The downside is that they might not really hear anything you're saying because they're chasing a billion different things at once. But in the workforce, you want to look for the creativity types too, not just the obsessive compulsive, not just the sociopaths. You want to get yourself a nice mix. The introvert. All right, see a lot of this in technology too. And I like this. I used to be socially awkward. I still am, but I used to be. When you need someone who listens, what happens with an introvert? They're the person in the meeting that really doesn't say anything, and then toward the end of the meeting, something brilliant comes out. Some insight that they picked up by doing a very quick content analysis of what everyone is saying, and they can come forward and summarize it and put it out there in a very simple way that has great meaning. So even though that person is not gregarious, there's still stuff going on of value, and they can bring it out so long as you know how to approach them and to get it out. And maybe you don't approach them in a group environment. Maybe you approach them in a one-on-one environment or in a situation that may not appear threatening. Paranoia. Now, you all are working on a lot of important things, and there's a lot of competition out there, and it can get really cutthroat. And you really want to guard your stuff, and it's hard to know who to let in, who to discuss your projects with, because you're kind of afraid somebody's going to trump your idea, or the larger, well-funded organization is going to be able to, if they think it's a great idea, they're going to be able to beat it, get to it faster. So paranoia is actually kind of healthy. It's an ingrained human behavior that actually is a survival skill. So for your organization, this can also be a survival skill, to know who to trust and who not to trust. So the closing thought in terms of looking at the organization, especially those of you in these new technologies, these forward-thinking, one foot into the future technologies, is in order to succeed, you kind of want to have, you got to know who you're working with and where they belong in your organization. If you find someone that's incompatible with the job that you've given them, it doesn't mean they're not right for the organization. It might mean they're just not right for that job, and that there might be some other place in the organization for where they're well suited. Because for a healthy tech asylum, you need a diverse mix of crazy. That's where all of the creativity, that's where all of the energy is going to come. And that's what's going to keep you away from what I call the startup graveyard, where in those 5 years, you may have failed not because of what you think failed you, market, financing, but your inability to work together in some really dynamic manner that helps you make the right kinds of decisions that you need in order to get to that 5-year mark. So my closing thought is, are the lunatics running the asylum? Hopefully. Hopefully. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Questions for Jon? Raise your hand. We have mic runner still in the audience. There we are. Yes, great. Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm trying to interview people for my team, and I was wondering if you can give any tips on how one can glean some of these personality traits just from an interview, or do you do some kind of role playing or something?
Oh, yeah. If you're not a large organization with an HR department where you can do personality testing or that you're skilled in the interview process, this can be a little tricky. How do you know that the person who is presenting themselves is who you're going to get after you hire them? Because they put their best foot forward. The best way to do that is really if somebody feels relaxed and comfortable enough to be themselves, it will come out. And oftentimes it comes out in a more informal process. Rather than a formal interview, do it a little more informally. Go to lunch, go out to coffee, get to know them personally first. A lot of times we use these formal interview questions and some of these like trick, how do you think kinds of complex questions. But if you're trying to build your culture, if you already know what their skills are, then their fit into your culture should come first. And so the more relaxed they are, and you let them know what the culture is, you present it, you model it in your own behavior. Sometimes when we are interviewing, we actually put up a wall as well, so that we don't let them see what we don't want them to see. So the more honest you are in presenting yourself as a human being, the more they're going to relax and to trust you, and that will let whatever they are come out. And it's not a matter of judging them. Whatever, even if it doesn't fit and if it's not what you're looking for, it's really not a judgment of them. It's just not a good fit for you. So that's the short answer. It can get a little more complicated than that, but that'll get you started.
Question over here.
In a really highly charged environment like healthcare, where you have a lot of political undertones, what attribute would you think would best suit different lunatics within that environment?
Yeah. Well, you're not going to get rid of the crazies in healthcare, that's for sure. When you get into these larger corporations and these big bureaucracies, you can't change that behavior single-handedly, and often my recommendation is to change your own behavior so that you can live with it. You can rail and rail and rail against it, but you'll make maybe a small dent, if anything, but the energy you expend to create change is not worth the result, right? The return on that energy investment. So instead, and this goes into my coaching part of what I do, and that is that people come to me and say, how can I change this person? How can I change that? And this one's driving me crazy, and how do I get them to stop? No, focus is on you. How can you change? Because it's all a matter of choices. What choices can you make as to how you relate to the person that's driving you crazy? It's not easy sometimes, right? And sometimes you have to make a hard decision and say, this is affecting the quality of my life. Maybe I need to go to a different department or to a different company. Otherwise, you just kind of got to suck it up sometimes. Any more? Yeah, it's lunchtime.
Great.
Right.
Big round of applause for
you.
Jon and everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.